Hello, everybody. Welcome to another weekend of me, Monica Guzman, talking about topics that impact America today. And I bring in the perspective from American history and American baseball to help anybody out there who is also not enjoying what's happening to the country at this time. I'm just offering you guys a different perspective. And this is an interesting one, right? So, a lot of what's happening around us today, or in this current era that we're in, a lot of stuff is engineered. Um, so, MLB, for example, is super engineered. Like, I don't know so much about when the Chicago Cubs won the World Series, but I definitely know that the World Series 2017, 18, 19, and 20 were all engineered. And they're engineered because they've got some sort of agenda that they're trying to push forward. I guess it was Mookie Betts, but Mookie Betts isn't doing so well. So he can't be your hero anymore, right? He can't even be your engineered hero. And so MLB is basically a shit show right now. It's just a mess. But again, it's engineered. So what you're watching isn't just what was baseball just getting. What you see on the field isn't happening organically, right? It's being forced. It's being engineered. And so with this June 19th thing now, did anybody else notice how quickly corporations got in on it? Obviously, MLB got in on it. There are a couple of other things that I noticed. It's almost like they knew ahead of time that this new federal holiday was going to go into effect, and everybody already had their marketing campaigns. They already had their parades apparently ready to go. So it didn't happen organically. It's obviously something that was already planned. And obviously, the last to find out are we the people. And so I want to focus not so much on this so-called new federal holiday. It's more of led up to it. So I want to go back and reference the Mises Institute, the failure of Marxism in Africa. So I want to go over that article in more detail because so Marxism and Africans go hand in hand, which is really ironic given that Karl Marx, had nothing to do with Africa, right? But so you've got this guy who came up with these sets of theories, or this set of theories, right? That the Jewish community, maybe Karl Marx was an anti Semite. I don't know. I honestly don't care. Um, But if he wasn't an anti Semite, then you've got the Jewish community taking his theories anyway, building upon them, turning them into critical theory, which has now evolved into critical race theory. And so it's like, that's why when it comes to Germany, I feel that the Jewish community did the same thing to Germany. I believe they tried to villainize the Italians in this country, and in their effort to villainize Italians, they ended up making them look super cool. They've definitely gotten away with turning the Catholic Church into bigger villains than they are. They've definitely gotten away with men who can provide for women. They've turned them into villains. So it's just one of the things I'll be talking about either tonight or tomorrow. I'm going to throw out a bunch of stuff. I'm going to rehash a bunch of stuff that I've already talked about. The point is to help people who want to talk about this stuff, to give you the leverage, give you the confidence, give you the springboard, give you the stepping stone that you need. It seems like a lot more people are speaking about this stuff far more openly than they were a year ago, which is outstanding. We need to talk about these things, but it's not just about preaching to the choir. Like, people who are going to come across these videos, people who retweet you on Twitter, people who like your videos, people who follow you on the other social media platforms. It's great. It's great. But at the same time, we can't keep falling back into this preaching to the choir stuff. You've got to put something, substance behind your talk, right? Like, you can't just talk, or you just can't be snippy on Twitter and entertaining. You've got to put something behind it. And the best way to do it is to get in your Ben Franklin groups locally and start putting actions. This isn't even about doing grassroots. This is about caring for your communities. This is about caring for your neighborhood, for your neighbors, right immediately that live among you. And I understand that some people, like if you live in the suburbs and they've stuck a bunch of apartment buildings, that causes some chaos. So you may not know all your neighbors, but this is the best time to start getting to know your neighbors. Cassandra Fairbanks tweeted out something really cool. I believe it was today. Sorry, I have this itch. Hang on, give you 1 second. Okay. Cassandra Fairbanks tweeted out something really cool, that her community is getting together and they're tackling public education. And it's another version of Ben Franklin's group. So people with a common cause are getting together and doing something about whatever their concerns are. And so if their cause is public education, outstanding. Your cause should be whatever impacts your neighborhood. If it's also public education, then go in that direction too. Essentially, you're putting together a neighborhood watch. Whether you're trying to reduce crime, whether you're trying to prevent hedge funds and investors from purchasing up a bunch of properties in your neighborhood, whatever your cause is, just do something about it. Let's not just preach to the choir. Okay, so the theme for this weekend is erasing America one law at a time. And it's not going away. Okay. So I wanted to cover the Mises Institute African Marxism article, but I also want to throw some other notes that I've got at you guys. Because everything ties in together. Okay, so let's just start instead directly with the theme for the weekend, which is erasing America one law at a time. Now, MLB is trying to legalize sports gambling on a federal level. So for them, it's not good enough that some states And some teams have already adopted on-site gambling. They want the whole enchilada, right? They want to legalize degeneracy. They want to victimize you because they know that you don't worship God. They know that you worship vices, and they want you to worship the vice of sports gambling. They want you to hand over your money to them because the house always wins. They know that you're weak because you're weak in your faith. Therefore, you are searching for a different God to worship, and they want your God to be sports gambling. And again, Robert Manfred is not an American, same way the dude from New Jersey isn't an American, same way Chuck Schumer isn't an American, right? So these are people who are pushing forward legalizing degeneracy because they have no roots to American soil. They don't give a rat's ass about your well-being. Whereas American A.G. Spalding worked to get rid of all sports gambling, on-site sports gambling, any gambling that had anything to do with American baseball in the late 1800s, early 1900s, because it victimizes the population. A.G. Spalding went as far as getting rid of Sunday games, getting rid of selling beer on site at games. So that is somebody who cared so much about the American population because he had such strong roots to the land, whereas your Chuck Schumers don't, Robert Manfred doesn't, Hein Bloom, Andrew Friedman, Farhan Zaidi. These are all people that do not have roots to American soil. Therefore, they push forward degeneracy. They want you to cheer for domestic violence suspensions. They want you to cheer for steroid users. They want you to cheer for MLB players that film fights at the minor league level. They want you to cheer MLB players that shove their girlfriends. They want you to cheer for MLB players that choke their girlfriends, that slap their future wife at a charity event where like the whole team is apparently there. They want you to sink down to the gutter because once you're in the gutter, you are no longer clean and they will throw it in your face. So, erasing America one law at a time. So, my belief is that if you guys, okay, so I admit that right now, when it comes to Christmas, I'm a little bit not sure what my position is anymore, given that it's a holiday that comes from paganism. And then in the early 1900s, it was turned into a consumer holiday. So I'm not sure where I land on Christmas anymore. I understand the idea behind it. And given that the Jewish community kicked out, they didn't want Jesus to be born on their land because they wanted to rule and all that fun stuff. But okay, I'm not sure how I feel about Christmas right now. But nonetheless, the theme again is erasing America one law at a time. So they're trying, okay, so when the atheist stuff was really hot and heavy, you had atheists across the country preventing Americans from placing the nativity scenes in public spaces. So given what's happening with sports gambling, the push to legalize sports gambling, and the fact that now I understand at least who's pushing it, I wonder if who was behind the atheist push to remove nativity scenes from American soil public spaces. Uh, I haven't heard about it for the last 2 years, so I guess that's kind of calmed down. But there were a few years, right, where atheists were going all in on getting these nativity scenes removed. I wonder who's behind that. I wonder if it's the same people like Robert Manfred, who is pushing to legalize sports gambling at a federal level. I wonder if they had anything to do with the nativity scene stuff. And I also wonder if they're behind the legalization of pot across the United States. Because again, Robert Manfred admitted that MLB wants legalized sports gambling at the federal level, because once it's a federal law, I mean, the states can still push back against it, but then the question becomes, do you have a strong enough governor? Do you have a strong enough, right, all the other voted positions at the state level, do you have strong enough people to resist the vice and the so-called tax money that comes with it? But okay, right? So I want to throw this out there because I will go into more detail later on, but I want to throw as many seeds as possible out there. I want to try to plant seeds in people's minds to get you thinking. Maybe you already know something about these topics and you can keep running with it. But again, my belief is that Americans lost their country in the 1960s. Basically, since World War I and World War II killed off potential alphas and prevented those men from spreading their seed, by the 1960s, America had very few gatekeepers and very few alphas left. And so you had the hippies, right? You had your free love degenerates. You had your commies, your Marxists, who had the opportunity to fill in the vacuum. So in the 60s, you also had the beginning of the end of religion in public schools, right? So there were 3 cases. I've got 1962, prayer in school, Engel versus Vitali. And then it spills over into 1963, where Engel was Jewish. In the Abington School District versus Champ. Okay, so that's the one that's 1963. Prohibited state-sponsored prayer in U.S. schools, later prevented Bible readings. And then you've got Mandalay Murray versus Curlit, remove Bible readings. In Abington School District versus Champ was a physicist. So I don't believe he was Jewish, but obviously he was somebody who believed in the science, and he managed to start getting the removal of Bible readings in public schools. And so this is what I mean about erasing America one law at a time. And some of these, I don't remember if any of these went to the Supreme Court, but in the lower courts, they managed to win their cases. And so what's happening right now is your own legal system is being used against you to put you in a box, to remove everything that makes you an American and turns you into a degenerate, right? I mean, as soon as I started removing prayer in public schools and Bible readings in public schools, you took away. So, something that is amazing to me, because again, I'm an outlier. So, because I'm an outlier, I have a very different perspective and I have a very different, there are experiences I didn't have because I didn't need them. I was a self-starter. I was I mean I had no, I was able to learn on my own. I did my homework all the time. I wasn't a slacker. I enjoyed reading. I enjoyed going to school. So I wasn't ever somebody that needed to get pushed. And so as a parent, I realized that the majority of people learn everything that they know. The majority of people don't pick up things on instinct. They learn them. And so we need to be more mindful of that reality. So so when so someone figured out that if you moved prayer in public schools and you remove Bible readings in public schools, you had generations of children who would never be exposed to prayer and to Bible readings because parents, the majority of parents rely way too much on other people to raise their children for them. And so I'm glad that in Cassandra Fairbanks' community, they found a common cause in public education. But I worry that, okay, if you're going to try to roll back the clock to before these cases, since before these cases removed Bible readings and prayer in public schools, outstanding. But if you're going to try to help people live under the current circumstances, there's not much that's going to be accomplished. So, and there's some people that I keep bringing up because I guess the work that they do impacts me the most or catches my eye the most, or I feel deserves my attention. And so Scott Adams, once he was told that he could no longer be promoted because he's a white male, found other ways to make an income. And he's very successful, right? So Scott Adams became a writer and Scott Adams became a cartoonist. Now, although I respect him, I personally don't want to tell people how to figure out how to live in the current system because the current system is not American. The current system has been built by non-Americans who have no roots to the soil. Therefore, when Americans fall into opioid addictions, when Americans fall into alcoholism, when Americans fall into gambling addiction, when Americans become dumber because they're smoking pot, the people who legalize these vices don't care because you're not their people. This isn't their soil. So you are dumbing yourself down. You are damaging your brain cells. You are damaging your body. You are damaging your family. You are damaging your kids. And would you have damaged yourself in other ways? Possibly, because addiction is a sign of low IQ. Um, if you pick up vices, I mean, if you pick up a vice, it means that you have low self-restraint. And low self-restraint is a direct sign of low IQ. So, would you have fallen into another vice? Maybe. But nonetheless, you have been captured by something that has been legalized by people who don't care about you, people who don't have roots to the land. They are carrying this agenda because they believe in critical theory. Theory seeks to overthrow the majority. That's the sole purpose. So, like I've said before, the same people care about critical theory on USA soil can cross the border and start in Mexico too. Again, I know that Mexico has two serious problems right now: violence and poverty. But what if we start helping Mexico? I'm not saying we, a collective we, people, Mexicans in the USA, if you love Mexico, you're going to help Mexico climb out of what's going on over there. You're going to figure it out. So, what if Mexicans figure out how to get Mexico to a better place? Obviously, we're not going to cure Mexico 100%, but we can try to alleviate some of what's going on over there, right? What prevents the critical race theory people from crossing the border and carrying out their critical theory agenda over there too? Because once that goes, Mexico as we know it is over. Why? Because now, and again, I jump around because everything's tied together. But once I do get into like my format, I'm breaking up. It will be a small chunk per stream, and the streams will not be an hour long. They will be far shorter. And then I'll do some like visual stuff that maps it out so that you understand where each stream falls into the bigger picture. And so hopefully those of you who are visual can see it, and then those of you who are listeners can have the visual as an additional aid. Sorry, I'm just reading that my internet connection isn't too hot right now. So I'm going to keep talking and hopefully you guys can catch it. Okay, so tonight's theme is erasing America one law at a time. It started in the 60s. It started with a case in 1962 and a case in 1963. One managed to remove prayer in public schools. The other managed to remove Bible readings in public schools. That was the beginning of the end, because you no longer had a generation of children being exposed to American values and ideals. And you know what? You can be a Christian and have limits. Just because you're Christian doesn't mean you have to feel sorry for every single homeless person that became homeless because they dove into drugs. Unless it's your family member, that every person is somebody's responsibility, and it falls on their family to pick them off the street and figure out how to help them. It's not, everybody isn't everybody's problem. And maybe that is the Darwinist that I think I have a strong leaning in that direction. But okay. So erasing America one law at a time. And so 1962, 1963 saw two cases. One managed to start the removal of prayer in public schools. The other one managed to start removing in public schools. A generation of kids no longer had exposure to American values. Now, I tie this into the fact that MLB is trying to legalize sports gambling at the federal level. Again, MLB is no longer run by Americans. So if you fall into a sports gambling addiction, that's your problem. They don't care. A.G. Spalding, American A.G. Spalding, did care. And that's why he eradicated gambling on baseball, on site, and anything that impacted the players. If there were players participating in gambling, if they were throwing games on purpose, they were gone. They were gone. No credit. They were gone. Obviously, there was evidence, as Cap Anson pointed out. The men removed from American baseball because they were caught gambling weren't just relieved of their position, they were let go because there was evidence. Okay, so two examples of laws that are erasing America. And obviously there's a bunch of laws in between the 1962-63 cases and MLB pushing toward federal legalizing sports gambling at the federal level. I think some of you out there will know more than I do about those cases. So hopefully you guys can pick that up. Okay, so let me go to, because I mean, the whole point is talking about this new federal holiday, right? That was obviously engineered. Corporations were more than ready to tweet about it and celebrate it and hold parades and whatever else they did. So, okay. So the African population on American soil is around 13% right now. And again, I am painting broad strokes, right? When I talk about the African population on American soil, it might sound harsh to some people, but I'm making these generalizations because where's the pushback? I have seen pushback from some individuals, but it seems like on a community level, people are into this new so-called federal holiday. And so the pushback has to be significant because this isn't, I don't see this as, so somebody pointed out that Trump actually tried to get this June 19th holiday on the books. Now, when it comes to Trump, I think some people thought he was going to fix a lot of stuff. But the issue is what Trump was supposed to win the first time, right? And we saw what they did to prevent him from winning the second time. So we don't know the kind of, we don't know what was happening behind the scenes that impacted Trump directly. So we don't know, I don't want to say threats, but we don't know what people were telling him. Like, Ivanka didn't marry an American, she married Kushner. Kushner's not an American. And so we know that Kushner was the one pandering to the African community. So, was making June 19th a federal holiday Kushner's idea or was it Trump's idea? Okay. You know, Trump was well loved in New York before he ran for president. It was just when he ran for president that they decided to turn him into a bad guy. But Trump was loved by the African community in New York City. So Trump is, you know, um, I don't want to. Maybe I can compare him a little bit to the way he lived on a personal level. So Babe Ruth enjoyed the women. Babe Ruth enjoyed New York. Trump did too, right? Trump enjoyed women. City. I don't know when he had his fun, whether like Ruth found um, another love of his life while he was married. I don't know anything about Trump as far as that kind of stuff, but we all know he enjoyed the women. The women flocked to Trump. Probably they flocked to Babe Ruth. And Trump had the opportunity to hang out with the most beautiful women in the world. So Trump is just a man. He's an alpha, right? But the mistake that some people made was putting too much, believing that he was going to cure your the things that you were most concerned about. Again, we just don't know. We just don't know what was happening in the White House, what was happening with his business deals. We just don't know. So, for example, I know I am grateful to Trump because he tweeted out that Dave Roberts was micromanaging the Dodgers in the 2018 World Series, that Andrew Friedman and Farhan Zaidi engineered for the team to lose again. But what Trump did was he gave credibility to my cause, and that caused enough of a stir among the analytic community of MLB to help someone like myself keep moving forward with my cause. So hopefully, I think that's the best you could take away from the Trump presidency. Hopefully, he brought some light to whatever your cause is, and then you kept running with it thereafter. But okay. So what I'm trying to say is I'm still not trying to pick on anybody. But there are some things that we need to talk about. And it's one thing to talk about things with the intention of hurting the other person. And it's another thing to have a conversation about things that we're not allowed to have a conversation about, but we need to talk about it to try to get out of the gutter. So I'm not picking on the African community, but there are some things that impact the African community directly, but we need to talk about these things anyways. So let me go to the Mises Institute article and let me expand on that article today. So this article finds that the African populations have a natural lean toward Marxism because Africa is not very modernized. You don't find indigenous populations on American soil. In Mexico, you find some indigenous populations, but they are it's pockets of them. Now, in Africa, I would say that the indigenous populations are larger than the civilized populations, which is why you get so many bleeding hearts that go over to Africa and build schools and try to lessen the guilt of having so much money or whatever the case might be. Um, so the Mises Institute article again found that Africans have a natural propensity to lean toward Marxism because they don't have a class system. They don't have capitalism to cite, right? So everyone's still doing the hut thing. Everyone's still doing the carry the water jug on your head thing. Even Ivanka Trump, right, pointed out that they're not, she indirectly pointed out that most of Africa is still not civilized or modernized. So, Africans, Black Lives Matter, right? The three women are all Marxists. So, again, you get that connection between the African community and Marxism. Um, the guy that this article is based on, I don't speak African, so pardon if I butcher his name. Kwame Numura. He is considered Africa's Marxist revolutionary. He was the first president of Ghana. He attended Lincoln University here in the United States, and he also attended the University of Pennsylvania. That's where he picked up his Marxist ideologies in about 1930. In 1947, he returned to Ghana, and by this time, he had formed his socialist Marxist ideals. He became, now get this, put together the Convention People's Party in 1951, which sounds very close to the political affiliation of the man, the Irish man here on American soil who's from Detroit but already passed away, who was all in on the Negro Leagues. Like, this is the dude in 1983, 100 years after the so-called incident where Cap Anson offended or didn't want to play with, they called them Negroes back then, so Africans. How cute, right? That he found it 100 years later. Okay. So Nomura, that's my best guess at that one. Nomura became president in 1960, and in 1962 he won the Lenin Peace Prize. Isn't that something? Now, this is where it gets really interesting. So he returns to Africa with an American education, but a Marxist leaning, because he met and hung out with another Marxist ideologist. Pan-African was another term that they use. Running around Africa, helping the lower IQ populations free themselves from the colonists. Okay. He built a he built a dam to provide electricity through the water. So hydroelectric power. So that's a positive thing, right? Something that Africa hasn't been able to do is create energy through solar. They haven't managed to build the infrastructure over there to get that done. But this guy managed to do the hydroelectric power stuff, which is impressive. So it shows that he did have a higher IQ, but this is where it gets crazy. So he also built schools and universities. Yet in 1964, there was an economic crisis throughout Africa. The economic crisis was caused by his Marxist policies. So, you know, we hear this here in America, right? We hear that we've just got to educate people and everything is going to be okay. And now, simultaneously, we've got people lowering the standards of public schools. So you can't learn math anymore if you go to a public school. You can't learn proper English if you go to a public school. You can't learn critical reasoning if you go to a public school. So we're funding education. We're funding education, but we're not educating students anymore. So obviously, a lot of us already know this, that public schools are nothing more than Marxist churning factories. And to be able to put it with this piece of information just solidifies that we're burning money in this country. We need to find a different way. I definitely want to see what happens in Cassandra's community as far as what they're doing over there. I think it's going to be interesting how that turns out, given that public education isn't the answer. So then you've got, because Numura declared himself president for life, so he became a dictator. There was a military coup d'etat waged against him in 1966. And so he actually went into exile in Romania. I wonder if this is before or after the Jewish community attempting to critical theory Romania out of existence occurred. So obviously it's afterwards, but I don't have the bandwidth, and but I'm definitely curious about the timeline in Romania. Um, but okay, that's completely something different. So Nomura passed away at age 62 in exile in Romania. And then BBC listeners had the audacity to vote him Man of the Millennium for Africa. So that tells you who listens and calls into BBC, right? Like, this is your hero, British people. Okay. And again, Africans, tribal tendencies makes them lean toward Marxism way more naturally than the rest of us do. And so what they pointed out is, even though Africa has no class system because they don't have capitalism, Marxism still failed them. So it's one of the reasons why we need to keep pushing back against it. Again, I think it's wonderful that so many people are pushing back against critical theory. That's definitely a great start. So again, we don't know how all of this is going to end up, right? We started, but we know that future generations are the ones that are going to keep rolling the ball, and hopefully they'll see some success, right, at that point. Um, Before I get further into June 19th, I don't know the history behind June 19th. I don't have an interest in learning African history. Um, I stick to American history because we live in America, and I have a child who also needs to learn American history because he lives on American soil. And so, for example, when MLB absorbed the Negro Leagues, it doesn't interest me either because, uh, I mean, really, they still haven't released the new stat stuff, or at least I haven't heard about it. But I know I am sticking to the statistics that I've got that I collected in October of 2020, because I don't anticipate that very many MLB players will move up into the top 20. They may get there on strikeouts, but home runs, hits, stolen bases, strikeouts, from the pitcher's perspective, um, they're just not going to get there. And I mean, I'm still rooting for Greinke. Hopefully, uh, hopefully he keeps moving up. Either way, Zach Greinke is a Hall of Famer. So is Madison Bumgarner. I really hope that we can make a case for DJ LeMahieu, um, but I just don't know. I mean, he's playing every, which is a good sign. And I believe he has a no trade clause for the first 2 years of his contract. So again, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know what the players get told. We don't know. We just don't know, right? So, okay. So let me, I'm approaching an hour, and I will pick this back up tomorrow around 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Let me throw out some numbers at you guys. I want to remind you, now I didn't do the math on some of these because I took a different direction, but I will have that for you tomorrow. But some of you can do the math too. Reminder, the USA population, according to the United States Census, hit 330 million July of 2020. So when MLB wants to brag that 1 million watched their Sunday night game, which is a bump up from the year before, okay, that's nice. But there are still, I mean, how many children are out there right now? Let's say there's still 250 million out there that you didn't capture. So relax. The population is still majority American white. You guys stand at 60%. Then you've got Latino at 18%. Then you've got African at about 12%. And I classify the Jewish community as a race, not a religion. So you've got the Jewish community at 1%. And then the remainder is Asian, right? So 70 million Americans voted for Trump and know that the 2020 election was sketchy. Okay. 60% of the population is still American white. Now, we know that a good percentage of white Americans have been turned against themselves into Marxists that have self-hate and guilt. So, what percentage do you guys want to estimate? Out of the 60%, how many are Marxist? I mean, are we safe saying that half of the 60% has been turned against themselves? So that leaves 30% America loving American whites. That's still a significant portion of the population because you still outnumber the Latinos, you still outnumber the Africans, you still outnumber the Jewish community. The issues get serious when you've got the other groups teaming up. So you've got your 30% Marxist white acting as gatekeepers for the 12% African population who is being led by the 1% Jewish population. So that's definitely where it starts to get sketchy. And that's you guys, right? Like, you need to figure out how you're going to fix that, right? My suggestion, the Ben Franklin model. Get to know your neighbors, get to know your common worries, your common causes, things you can work on together. And another thing, given the revelations of January 6th and the FBI, another reason why you want to decentralize is to prevent from FBI members infiltrating your groups, right? So keep it small, keep it under 30, because you can smoke out the infiltrator far more easily. You can smoke out an infiltrating FBI member far more easily in a group of 30 than you can in a group of 100, 1,000, 10,000, right? You're not going to sniff them out definitely once you reach 1,000. You've got to be able to sniff them out. So if you keep your group small, it's way easier to figure out who among you is working for the other side, right? Because from my understanding, the FBI was an unnamed co-conspirator in January 6th. So how many people ended up showing up that wouldn't have shown up had the FBI not hidden their identity and goaded people into being there on January 6th? So I can tell you, I was locked out of my Twitter account that day. So I was following what was going on, but Twitter locked me out for 12 hours over a couple tweets that they made me delete. But my trophies that I didn't post. So I think like I had to delete 3 tweets, and then they let like 10 of them go. So I win. But I shouldn't brag, right? Because I might get myself into trouble. But so I was following I was following what was happening, but I couldn't. I had no voice. I was locked out of my Twitter account that day. But how many people ended up at the Capitol on January 6th because the FBI infiltrated however they did, and the most vulnerable among those people said, hey man, yeah, let's go do this. If you form your Ben Franklin groups of 30 or less, and I always lean toward men. We've got to help the men get smarter, get stronger. Women who want help the men get smarter, get stronger. Women who want to participate and have glory. There are so many other ways to do that. Rushvi, again, he ended up deleting all his tweets, but he had tweeted out an image of the character that gets used when the NPC theme was going around, that character that carried over the gray. I can't remember what it stands for, but so you've got, your feminist woman saying, I became a physicist or whatever. And then you've got the traditional woman saying, raised 6 physicists. So we women have the gift to give birth. And so what you do by yourself, because you're going to die, instead of being selfish and wanting glory and wanting fame, and then you're going to die, and so all of that dies with you. Instead of being one physicist, you can give birth, you can breed, you can nurture 6 physicists. I mean, I trust me, I know what happens post birth, and eventually I will speak more publicly about my experiences, because, like the vaccination stuff, I was very pregnant during the swine flu, and I was offered the vaccine and I turned it down. So when I was concerned about my favorite baseball players last year getting any sort of uh, vaccine trial, uh, I didn't voice my concern for them just to talk. I would do that for myself too. So a lot of this stuff, I'm not preaching, I'm not speaking out of turn. I've lived some stuff. Like I've made decisions in my life. I have not made sacrifices. I don't think I was ever faced with serious mm, situations where I had to really pick between the hard and the rock place, the rock and the hard place. And I don't believe I've ever been in that position, but I've made choices. And so I know. And I think that's one of the reasons why we don't hear about what happens to women post birth, is because we don't want to scare young girls out of giving birth. But you have a reproductive system. Your job on earth is to reproduce. That's what was chosen for you. But okay. That's definitely for a stream for a later date. And it's probably won't be on YouTube at that point. I'll probably have something else going on. But don't be selfish, women. Don't be selfish. Don't be drunks. Don't be alcoholics. Don't be drug addicts. Don't be gambling addicts. If you find your mate, he's gonna love you and he's gonna cherish you. And he will help you stay young and beautiful. And he's gonna love you post birth. So it's gonna be okay. So again, let me wrap this up. Let me go back to the numbers. 60% American white. You're still the majority. Keep your majority. It should So you've got the African population that is extremely loud and makes their presence known. And if you didn't know the numbers, you would think that they are the majority. And it's just because it's a different culture. A lot of them don't have self restraint because they have a lower IQ. I haven't read this article yet, but apparently some Africans still have a percentage of like the human species that died off a long time ago. Somehow they still have a portion of that DNA. And so those people had smaller brains. And right, as humans evolved or humans got better at hunting and gathering, the brain size grew. Somehow, Africans still have a portion of super ancient peoples, smaller brains, which explains the lower IQ, which explains that they're trying to keep you guys there. So, African leaders, you've got Candace Owens, and then you've got the preacher, Jesse Lee Peterson, I believe. Hopefully you guys can figure out how to help your community so you can help them expand their brains and expand their IQ. Because I think what people are trying to do is push you down instead of lift you up. Uh, that's a tough road. I mean, you think Mexicans have a tough road. I think the Africans have a tougher road. Okay, you guys. So let me wrap this up. So hopefully you got something out of tonight's stream. I'm not interested in focusing on African history. I'm not interested in focusing on the push toward Africanization of America. I bring it up because it's the examples. And then I'm comparing and contrasting why the America of today isn't American, and it's definitely not the America of late 1800s, early 1900s. So tomorrow I'm going to pick this back up and I will get into more tying in the critical theory stuff. I'm going to get into more historical statistics. Like, I'm going to point out why so many Africans are just not happy on American soil. So hopefully you guys have a wonderful Sunday. Tomorrow's Father's Day, right? I'm so happy for DJ LeMahieu. He's a dad. Not all dads approach fatherhood with extreme outward joy, right? Some dudes just, cool, I'm a dad. They keep doing their provider thing, right? So I don't know how DJ LeMahieu approaches fatherhood, but I know there's a lot of people out there who are happy for him that he's a dad. The same way that a lot of people are happy for him when he does well. There's a lot of DJ LeMahieu fans out there. Is Mad Bum a dad too? When Mad Bum pitched the 7-inning no-hitter, they showed a camera on his family, and I thought it was his wife holding a baby. If that baby is his, or if it was whomever was with his wife, that's pretty exciting. And Mad Bum's a dad too. Happy Father's Day, you guys. Happy Father's Day to any other dads that run into the stream. I don't have anything specific for Father's Day, but we'll see if I work something in. So Hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday. Hopefully you barbecue with your family or you get to do all your dad jokes. There is a very funny dad joke teller out there. So hopefully he gets to tell all his dad jokes on his day tomorrow. All right. See you guys tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thanks again for watching. Good night.